Many of my questions have been answered by your excellent opening statement and some of the questions from my colleague, Senator Davey, but I just come back to the number of complaints. It's a foundation year for a body such as yours. Have you taken a view that you're adequately resourced, given that you would have been resourced on a projection, and now we sort of have a feel for how many complaints are coming in and how many investigations you're feeling you have to initiate? Yeah. Are you going to need to advocate for a greater budget bid?
Our role's growing, Senator. I think the longer we're there, the more we learn. So are we adequately funded by the government at the moment? The answer is yes. Will I be asking for more money in time? The answer is most likely. But it'll be on the back of a very solid business case to say why, exactly how it'll be spent. There was a reference earlier to the government's budget allocation to us for trade just recently. So that's obviously going to be helpful. You saw the weight of the amount of trade work and our roles that will come out of the roadmap once that's finalised, etc. But yeah, I just think we're a growing industry so far as expectations of us that'll just need to be matched. Not trying to build an empire here by any stretch. Lean and mean and accurate as our goal, but we can only do so much with particularly IT related stuff. I think is going to be a big ask for us in the future.
I asked a question earlier of the ACCC. I'm just interested if you have any views at this stage. I know it's early days about how you envisage the interaction with the ACCC, and I don't ask from a negative perspective. From my perspective, I see as an old lawyer, a lot of overlap, both from the visibility of data and also a reaction to that, and there could also be an investigation which is of interest and within the jurisdiction of both. Now, both of you may disagree with that, but you could have a market manipulation, but you could also have as part of that, a gross non-compliance. So I'm just interested where we're at in our thinking on that.
Yeah, so our relationship with ACCC is really strong, as it is with the Bureau of Meteorology. And I have a dedicated staff member allocated to the roadmap and the work in relation to trade, the Deputy Inspector Blacker, who's very welcome to speak in more detail on this. There's some way to go in my assessment of where we are. We're very forthright in putting our views forward as to where some of the gaps or the opportunities may be, and we just hope we're listened to, and it's a work in progress. Senator?
Role clarity is one of the main things when you're building a regulator that you need to be successful. You need to know where you're playing, what your scope is, what your powers and tools are. So that's an important thing that we've been working through in that space. We have good working relationships with the ACCC now. We're in active engagement with them, probably not overstating it at the moment to say a daily basis. And in terms of the need to formalise exchange of information or other things in agreements, we're entirely open to that. But at the moment, we've not come across an instance where we haven't been able to work cooperatively on things together to get whatever outcome we're both seeking. As that water market reform rolls out, may we need to get more formal in that space to allow our information and data to flow, possibly, and if so, we will.
Senator, just if I could.
Yeah, sure.
And this has been articulated to me very clearly that as an independent body, this is a once-in-a-generational opportunity to get this thing right. So we may not be that popular when we're pushing back on things where we think things aren't working or where they could work better, because you only get one shot at this. So we're not going to apologise for being pretty boisterous in the way we think it should work from an independent point of view and where things should sit out. But we're nice to get along with too on most occasions. So we're not unreasonable, I don't think. But we're very keen to make sure this reform lands the right way and it's functional and it works. And we don't have, as we have in the Basin Plan, as I referred to in my opening remarks, legislation that's not enforceable or things that has no penalties. What's the point of that? So we just want to see it get right. The roadmap's there, it's been developed, and it's a work in progress.
In your annual report, I'm I'm sort of paraphrasing, but you near the end, you said there's no clear indication that things weren't being done properly. There are areas that could be improved. This is your account in your report, and that you've spoken to various parties. Can you just unpack with me what speaking means? And is that a formal exchange of letters to parties? Is it? And are those sorts of exchanges public and transparent?
So I don't quite understand your question.
So the end. I'm looking at the exchange of information.
Yeah.
From that point of view. So you give an indication that at this point in time, at the time of the annual report, that generally things were being done properly, and that where areas of improvement you'd spoken to the various parties. So I'm trying to understand the way the regulator communicates, right? So I have experience like, ASIC will send you a formal letter which is can be discovered. What is your practices at this point in time, given that you're relatively new?
Sure, I'll let my Deputy Leopold also contribute to this answer, but I think the reference you're making there is in relation to the work we did with the MDBA the CHUO.
It was, I don't know, it was generally, your general statement. I'm not trying to tie to any particular letter, and I'm not asking questions for any particular knowledge of an incident.
Yeah, I have no problem with the question, I'm just trying to frame the context.
So where my interest is that in future estimates, you say that you have 50 investigations, are there 50, there might be 50 letters of compliance, there may be formal letters exchanged with the state, and how will I be as a member of the public and a senator understanding not so much your work but the response to your work, and the accountability on the others that have been in non-compliance or may be encouraged to improve, to put it in a nicer way. So that's
it's a great question. So the example you gave with that quote was in relation to bodies of work that the MDBA and the CHUO had been doing, and we did a consultative assessment of that, and we were told there was massive problems, the joints were falling over, they weren't doing their wrong, and they weren't doing the role. We found that wasn't true, but there were areas that could be improved on. So we've had correspondence with those agencies, with verbally as well as written, and that's all kept in our record management system, for example. But we will follow up with those agencies as that example. On other individual examples, there's probably a different answer for every type of example, but it's all captured. And I publish findings all the time, so transparency is our goal, but we still have privacy things that we need to adhere to as well.
Yes, so in time we'll be seeing a series of published letters of findings where maybe redacted, but I understand the privacy issue, and then publication of letters of non-compliance or things like that. I'm just trying to get understanding how we're going to operate, because it's a very different environment. Like ASIC, and you've got a whole bunch of companies. You've got state, you've got all these players, private, public.
We've demonstrated
small
that.
Farmers, it's complexity. So that's where the question comes from.
Yeah, so an example is Goulburn Murray Water, an audit that we did there. The findings were published. Their media release went out, all that sort of stuff, clear and transparent. And other work?
Yeah, so particularly on the audit, so we've got legislative responsibilities to publish our findings and recommendations in that space. When we go into a compliance audit, sometimes we'll also come across areas for improvement, so that we might find compliance, but the system or the issue that we're looking at is either inadequate or ineffective. And we find, so we will come forward with recommendations not only on compliance, but also any issues we find with adequacy or effectiveness in that process as well. And they're captured and published within our audit report. So it depends on which thing we're looking at. So if it's compliance with the water resource plan, often the audit might be the tool. If it's an investigation, that'll vary, and we'll look to pick up statistics on those sorts of things, and as other jurisdictions do with performance reporting. And then the oversight roles, again, quite different.
Well, trade price reporting could end up in prosecution, so there'll be a number there that'll be publicised, etc.
So if I understand your evidence, you're also, where there's a clean bill of health, being minded to report on that. Because one of the criticisms of an ICAC, I know it's a little bit unrelated, is that everyone knows about an investigation, but then there's never the clean bill of health, and that wouldn't be necessarily the best way to go in a community of interest, if I could put that at the Murray-Darling Basin. So is that, if I capture the sort of high-level philosophy of your position, where someone's doing well, you'll let people know?
We'll publicise where they're going well, and we'll publicise where there's improvements to be made, and then we'll report back on whether those improvements have been made or not.
Just a bit more time, Chair. Yeah. There was Mr. Lacker gave us some evidence last time about the various MOUs with the states. Can we have a bit of an update on that? Because we were going multilateral, weren't we, from state to state? And if you could give us an update on your journey.
You want to update your statement?
Again, we got lots of free advice that a multilateral MOU was not possible. We do have an MOU in place with 4 jurisdictions, which is signed by their regulatory agencies, and that allows us to develop a range of schedules as well, which are also in development and coming through, which will detail how we exchange information between compliance agencies on live investigations and other matters. So that's one MOU that we have from one aspect of our role, which is the compliance and working with state compliance agencies. We have a second MOU between us and the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. That dealt with some matters to do with the separation of functions back in late 2021, but it also deals with some ongoing areas of how we can seek information and data from the MDBA, for example, in relation to modelling or accounting and other things. So we've got a range of arrangements, and I suspect we don't have a complete set yet, but as we come across areas where we need more arrangements, we'll look to put those in place.
I just have one final question, Chair. Have you had any interactions, both formal or informal, with Mr. Beasley, the Commissioner from my own state?
No.
No further questions.
Thank you.